I'm going to start with a reading this morning, but I welcome you all here, and it's so good to see so many familiar faces, as well as some new ones, too. From the 20th century Universalist minister Clinton Lee Scott on prophets. Always it is easier to pay homage to the prophets than to heed the direction of their vision. It is easier blindly to venerate the saints than to learn the human quality of their sainthood. It is easier to glorify the heroes than to give weight to their examples. To worship the wise is much easier than to profit by their wisdom. Great leaders are honored not by adulation, but by sharing their insights and values. Grandchildren of those who stoned the prophets sometimes gather up the stones to build the prophets' monuments. Always it is easier to pay homage to prophets than to heed the direction of their vision. In the spirit of openness and attention to the prophets and their wisdom, as well as to our living tradition, let us worship together. Welcome to worship at the Unitarian Universalist Church of Greensboro. My name is Donna Scheid, and I am a member of this congregation. Unitarian Universalists believe that each person has a trustworthy relationship with the Spirit, with the Holy, with the source of all life, with what some call God, though we name it and know it differently from one another. And we believe that because we are interconnected, nobody is free until we all are free. So we strive to build beloved community here on earth in our fellowship with one another and in our work for justice. Whether today is your first or your 1,000th Sunday in our midst, we are stronger because you are here with us. We are one people of many beliefs, many origins, sexualities, and genders. We are all growing, all learning, all loved. Our ministry team here at UUCG is Cindy Dillard, our Director of Children's and Youth Ministry, Julie Hamilton, our Congregational Administrator, Luke Steichleather, our Experimental Director of Music, and our Minister, the Reverend Sadie Lansdale. Okay, a few ground rules before we get started today. Should you have your cell phone on during church making noise? No. All right. Should you take your mask off? No. All right. If you have a joy or sorrow to share in our prayers of the people, you can write it on the yellow card in your order of service and hold it during our opening hymn for our ushers to collect. You can also light a candle of remembrance at any time during the music in the service. If you're joining us online, go ahead and say hello in the chat. If you're joining us in the sanctuary, won't you wave hello to everyone joining us online?
I don't need that. My name is Bill Johnson, and I am a member of this congregation. Rebecca Johnson will light our chalice. Please join me in our chalice lighting words found in your order of service. We light this chalice, symbol of our Unitarian Universalist faith, to remind us to connect in spirituality and service, to care for each other and the world, and to create loving community. A covenant contains the promises we make to one another in response to the great gift of living, holding ourselves to these holy aspirations. Will you join me in our church covenant? We, the members of Unitarian Universalist Church of Greensboro, do covenant to promote a search for personal meaning, respecting the individual truth in a community process quest, speak and act with caring, courtesy, and love, thereby maintaining emotional, physical, and spiritual safety for all. Support UUCG and denominational efforts with our resources. Combat injustice while promoting equality. Nurture our children on their spiritual journey. Hold ourselves to this covenant, especially during times of conflict and disagreement. During our opening music, ushers will come forward to collect your yellow cards. Will you rise in body or in spirit for our opening hymn, number 34 in your gray hymnal, Though I May Speak with Bravest Fire.
How beautiful it is to be together. We gather in gratitude this morning, turning our hearts to thanks and praise for the gift of living in the presence of the Spirit that animates all life, and in the knowledge that we are powerfully, profoundly connected to all that is, all that has been, and all that will be. During these few minutes of silence, you can focus on something you're grateful for, or someone you are remembering, especially today, or just the sensation of your chair supporting you. Will you find a comfortable place in your seat and take a few easy breaths as we settle into our shared silence together? We bring the echoes in our hearts before our community and before the holy in this sacred space and time. If you're online, this is the time to share your joys and sorrows with one another in the chat. If there's a joy on your heart, you may come forward silently and place a flower in the vase here on the altar. If there's a sorrow or a burden or a fear, you may come forward to place a stone in the water. If there's someone special to you on your heart, you may light a candle of prayer and presence for them. If you're not sure how you're feeling, or maybe you're feeling a little antsy, there are pipe cleaners in the back to fidget with. This is our time to take stock of how we arrive here and to take what we need, knowing that the table is set for us all. Among our joys and sorrows this morning, Becca Allison is recovering from a stroke at Moses Cone. Please contact Mary Davis if you would like to visit her. This one from Pat Vetter on our hearts today. 4 years ago today, Eric Eno, my husband, died. Pat, again, you are on our hearts. A joy from Paula and Rod Swanger celebrating their 49th wedding anniversary this month. Congratulations to Paula and to Rod. I invite you now to offer the names of those people on your hearts, living or dead, near or far, that this community might hold them in prayer and in love. You can type them in the comments if you're joining us online, or speak them now. Please join me in prayer, the legacy of caring based on the words of the contemporary Unitarian Universalist minister, Reverend Tandeka. Despair is my private pain, born from what I have failed to say, failed to do, failed to overcome. Be still, my inner self. Let me rise to you. Let me reach down into your pain and soothe you. I turn to you to renew my life. I turn to the world, the streets of the city, the worn tapestries of brokerage firms, drug dealers, private estates, personal things in the bag lady's cart, rage and pain in the faces that turn from me, afraid of their own inner worlds. This common world I love anew, as the lifeblood of generations who refuse to surrender their humanity in an inhumane world courses through my veins. From within this world, my despair is transformed to hope, and I begin anew the legacy of caring. We ask these things for ourselves, for those we love, and for those we do not love, but are working to learn to love. Amen. In our singing meditation, we sing the things we often cannot say, our prayers and our yearnings, our heartbreak and our hope. Please stay seated and sing from your heart number 1031 in your teal hymnal, Filled with Loving Kindness. We'll sing the first verse with an I, the May I be filled with loving kindness. We'll sing the next verse with a you, and we'll sing the third verse with a we. Now is a time for our story for all ages. This story comes to us from the biblical book of Luke, chapter 20, verses 20 through 25. You may have heard of it before, or maybe not. The protagonist is Jesus, a first-century prophet and known troublemaker. Jesus was born Jewish, in other words, a member of a marginalized minority faith community at the time. He was born in Palestine, which was a part of the Roman Empire. The ruler of that empire was known as Caesar. The Roman Empire at the time was not very democratic. Those who challenged the authorities could get in a great deal of trouble. Another thing you need to know for this story, when people back then wanted to buy something, they sometimes used a coin called a denarius that probably looked something like our quarter today, though made of silver. This coin was very valuable because it represented something like an entire day's work. It also was a symbol of Roman rule. The denarius coin had the image of Caesar on it, who some people thought of as a god. This went against the Jewish religion. So let us begin the story. Keeping a close watch on Jesus, the teachers of the law and the chief priests sent spies who pretended to be sincere. They hoped to catch Jesus in something he said so that they might hand him over to the power and authority of the governor. So the spies questioned him, "Teacher, we know that you speak and teach what is right, and that you do not show partiality, but teach the way of God in accordance with the truth. Is it right for us to pay taxes to Caesar or not?" Jesus saw through their duplicity and said to them,
"Show me a denarius. Whose image and inscription are on it?"
"Caesar's."
"Then give back to Caesar what is Caesar's, and to God what is God's."
The spies were unable to trap Jesus in what he had said there in public, and astonished by his answer, they became silent. Now children ages 4th grade and younger are invited to join their teachers in the RE wing for snack, play, and fellowship. choir. Thank you. I needed that this morning. And thank you to the flexibility of our experimental music director, who didn't realize the experimental in his job description meant keeping up with the play-by-play of lay persons in the pulpit. Have you ever been in a situation where you later thought of just the right thing to say? And why do these things always occur after the fact? More importantly, why was there a need for a right thing to say? Did somebody say something that was hurtful without thinking, or perhaps even worse, did they say something to hurt you? Advice columns are full of these kinds of instances and what to do about them. And I'm a sucker for advice columns. But so is the Bible, apparently. So after all, in the earlier reading that we just heard from the book of Luke, Jesus provides an unexpected response, an example that astonishes those who would try to trick him. And I think there's a lot to learn here. So I'd like to explore that meaning in those particular passages with you this morning. So let me start out by saying a few words about myself. I do not consider myself a Christian. Despite a good Methodist religious education, or maybe because of it, I am not a Christian in this sense. I find the Jesus who is fully human to be a far more powerful example in my own life than the one who is thought to be divine. Jesus, the prophet and the political activist, rather than Christ the Messiah. Jesus, the Son of God, to the extent that we are all creations of this infinite energy, this incredible mystery. In other words, my understanding of Jesus echoes that of 19th century Unitarian Ralph Waldo Emerson. I do, as you might have guessed by now, believe in a God. I know that is not true of all of you, so please have some patience with me this morning as I make sense of a text that forefronts God by substituting whatever might be most meaningful to you: higher presence, mystery and wonder, the universe, beloved community, and so forth. Let me also briefly preface my words today by saying I am no expert any more than any layperson. I have not studied the scriptures as scholars or pastors do. What gives me something to lean on as I speak is that as Unitarian Universalists, we believe in a living tradition and direct experience of that transcending mystery and wonder. Yet, in an age when too many are ready to claim expertise about matters which they know very little about, I want to make clear to you the limits of my meaning making. That said, let's return to the story from Luke about paying taxes to Caesar. The spies who are sent to trip Jesus up pretend to be sincere, but are in fact hoping to capture Jesus saying something on the record so that they can hand him over to the officials. First, they flatter Jesus by highlighting how he speaks and teaches what is right and does not show partiality. Sometimes this is translated as Jesus' lack of concern with what others think. In other words, Jesus is righteous and will not participate in doublespeak based on who is around or what kind of trouble he may get in. These are honorable qualities, of course, but here they are being touted by those who would lift them up in order to corner Jesus. What the spies overlook is another quality of Jesus, a mischievous virtue. You see, while I may not be a pastor or a New Testament scholar, I study rhetoric, sometimes described as the art of language and argument, typically that language directed towards a particular audience or a particular purpose. For some, rhetoric has a bad reputation because of its potential for being superficial and slippery. Rhetoric, however, also has been part of the liberal arts education for centuries because at its best, it is the lifeblood of debate, of meaning, and of public life. Returning to the story, Jesus enacts a mischievous virtue, employing what might be called a trickster rhetoric. A trickster is someone who has a kind of deep understanding, some might say wisdom. Instead of stating this wisdom directly, however, this person or character is something of a prankster, disrupting norms, surprising expectations, and remaking the usual course of things in doing so. Tricksters are tricky for sure, sometimes foolish seeming or funny, and also potentially powerful. Though not in the conventional sense of that term. Tricksters come to us from many literary and storytelling traditions, from Shakespeare's Fool to certain U.S. indigenous peoples' Coyote. To be clear, trickster rhetoric is not the easy comeback that puts another person in their place. It is not high and mighty, nor does it have that cheap superiority that we sometimes think of when fantasizing what we might have said to someone if we had only thought of it fast enough. That kind of rhetoric achieves an easy victory that helps us save face when we are hurt or angered. Relationally, it produces a seesaw. You put me down, or I could see that you were going to or trying to, so I'm going to get you back. Trickster rhetoric, in contrast, works because it is not just smart. It is often politically savvy and ethical. How so? Again, consider the stakes here in Luke. Politically, the spies are trying to ensnare Jesus so as to relieve themselves of this nuisance of a person who stirs up trouble by speaking of new ways of being. They do so by presenting him in front of others with an either-or dilemma. What is right, to pay taxes or not to pay taxes? Ethically, they approach him with false flattery that insists that he say the right thing, regardless of other stakes or concerns. Jesus understands what they are up to. He is supposed to choose option A, pay taxes and support the emperor and his empire, possibly selling out his faith and mission, or option B, don't pay taxes and be publicly branded as a troublemaker, advocating what is unlawful. Instead, Jesus chooses option C, a third way. This is a feature of trickster rhetoric. Another sign of trickster rhetoric is that Jesus asks for a coin, a denarius. What is he going to do? The crowd must be wondering, a magic trick? What a way to capture an audience's attention. But Jesus is no mere entertainer. He is a trickster rhetorician, and for that reason we must look for the subtle. This passage has been read by many and to argue about many things. For some, it's about separation of church and state. For others, it's about the wisdom of paying taxes. But I myself have been puzzling over what it means, particularly spoken by someone like Jesus, right? A political activist, a Jewish person, a member of a marginalized and oppressed community that's within the Roman Empire. To me, the sticking points in the passage have to do with two central questions. What belongs to Caesar, or here we might simply say the empire, and what belongs to God. Again, please substitute as necessary mystery and wonder and so forth. The conventional interpretation patently points out that the coin belongs to Caesar because its image and inscription are Caesar's, completing the analogy, what is God's is made in the image of God and with God's inscription, the imago Dei, which is assumed to be humans, us, the listeners in the text and the readers of the text millennia later. But those are answers rather than questions. Jesus had asked a question and made statements that implied further questions. It was the spies who provided any sure answers here. And it was the answer only to the question, whose image and inscription are on the coin? What belongs to the empire? What belongs to God? Those questions are not asked directly by Jesus, but they are implied in the moral of the story. Then give back to Caesar what is Caesar's and to God what is God's. Let's be clear here. It is the spies who have identified the coin as Caesar's, not Jesus. It is their definition of what belongs to empire that seems to answer their insincere question. What would Jesus' own answer have been? He doesn't say, and we can't know for sure, of course, and it doesn't really matter. But what might someone else see when looking at a coin? Fewer and fewer of us carry coins these days. But what do you see? A precious metal born of the earth? The labor and equipment necessary to extract it? Some portion of what it takes to buy a soda from a vending machine? An image of America's first president, whom some in the early republic wished to refer to as His Highness. That presidential image now joined with the inscription, "In God we trust." Tip money. A possible donation to someone who is hungry. Which of these belong to empire? Which of these belong to God? How do we organize our lives accordingly? These are the questions this trickster rhetorician raises for us. I fear it isn't so simple as some preset stamp either on a coin or on us. Henry David Thoreau taught us as much when he refused to pay his taxes, because the version of empire in which he lived pursued what he thought to be an unjust war. Give to the empire what is the empire's. These taxes are not justly the empire's, Thoreau must have answered to himself. I wish I had clearer answers myself to these questions. What is the empire's? What is God's? As many of you know, in recent years, I have felt called to work on voting rights and electoral reform, and to do so through our shared UU values and faith tradition. This work raises many questions for me. I came to the work when I witnessed firsthand the diminishment of my sense of self and others within our political system. In recent years, for example, just one example of many, final hour passage of a state law regarding hours for early voting reduced the number of polling places by 20%, removing A&T locally as a polling site, among others, as well as numerous sites in poor and rural counties across the state. Through the years, I have spoken to prospective voters who did not realize that they were eligible to vote, or who didn't think that their vote even mattered. And it's sometimes hard to make the case that votes do matter in what has been called the country's most gerrymandered state. I believe this work does not belong to empire, insisting on that inalienable right to liberty attached to political expression. This work for me is part of the demand on that promissory note guaranteed to all. But why for me? Is the work God's or part of my faith? After all, I love common cause. I'm a member of the League of Women Voters, so why not just do this work elsewhere? I guess because I don't want the only voice of religion in our public sphere to be dominated by a particular faith group. That compels me to search my soul and to speak in religious terms about what most deeply, what my values mean. And those values that inspire, my religious values, which inspire my political commitments. Terms like the right of conscience and the use of democratic processes, our fifth principle, but also inherent worth and dignity, our second principle, these values that voting rights advocate Desmond Meade lifts up as important, and even respect for the interdependent web of all existence, which surely includes political existence, our seventh principle. For those secularists who squirm in their seats at such talk, let me reassure that no less a classic liberal thinker than political philosopher John Rawls recognized religion as having a place in the public sphere and in public reason, something that has long been part of this American experiment. And for those who fear that political involvement corrupts religious and spiritual practice and being, let me acknowledge that yes, it can, and it does, but it doesn't need to. A related and harder question regarding God and empire is one described by Christian biblical scholar Walter Wink back in 2003 as the ultimate religious question today. And I quote him. How can I find God in my enemy? Writing from a Christian perspective, though in terms that echo our own universalist tradition, Wink reminds us, and I quote him at length here, Jesus' teaching does not presuppose a threshold of decency, but something of God in everyone. There is no one, and surely no entire people, in whom the image of God has been utterly extinguished. Faith in God means believing that anyone can be transformed, regardless of the past. To write off whole groups of people as intrinsically racist and violent is to accept the very same premise that upholds racist and oppressive regimes. End of quote. This is the harder part of faith-based activism. To be merely right, to be only on the right side of things, that's the work of empire. To go this third way, as Wink calls it, is something altogether different. This, I think, is part of that love that our UU faith calls us to forefront in our lives. And let me be direct here. Radical, scary, all-embracing universalist love, not just of justice, not just of those with whom we work, but of those who would do us wrong. That's empire defeating love. This too is what calls me to this work from within my UU faith. And I'll be the first to say, I don't know how to do this love. I don't know how to do it. My stomach turns. My anger rages. I don't know how to do this love. And I don't even know what to do about not knowing what to do about this love, about adopting this third way, this truest universalism, except to find those in history or in our contemporary moment who seem to know something about it. And we are blessed with many in our faith who know love and amazing grace. I believe the Reverend Cindy Pincus to be one. Take a drink. In her own astonishing lecture this summer as part of General Assembly, Reverend Pincus spoke with incredible wisdom about forgiveness, what she understands to be a primary focus of Jesus' teachings. Forgiveness as the antidote to expectation and resentment. Forgiveness that neither condones nor gives up on repair. Forgiveness because I want to get free, that all may be free. Forgiveness not required of us, not achieved by us, but a grace received. Forgiveness that accepts that our enemies are often our greatest teachers. Forgiveness that does not require that we trust or engage with enemies, but forgiveness that grows on gratitude, mends in mindfulness, seeks the means to serve, and let go of the need to punch back, even while holding accountable. This is, as Reverend Pincus describes, the divine economy in which the typical coins of the realm, resentment, obsession, revenge, and payback, have no purchasing power and carry no weight. Jesus is also one of these third wayers, and for that I respect him deeply. After sitting with the passage on paying taxes to Caesar, I have a clearer sense of why the spies were astonished and silent, of that truly miraculous and mischievous virtue that Jesus embodied. Love. Love. Typical human response, and I am a typical human, when facing down the enemy are fight or flight. But Jesus did neither. In an act of rhetorical judo, Jesus takes the spy's question meant to ensnare him and instead turns its energy back on them. Politically, he appears to answer the question correctly, or at least he doesn't answer it incorrectly. He doesn't get turned into the governor, not that day. Ethically, the answer to the question depends on the spy's own construction of the world, what they are able to see, observe, articulate, and understand. Aiming at deceit and to trip Jesus up, the spies have given themselves over to the ways of empire. As his advice reveals, give back to Caesar what is Caesar's. Pay the taxes, if you will, he seems to say. Your understanding cooperates with that of empire. This observation alone could be thought of as a clever return zinger launched at those who seek to hurt him. However, Jesus does not leave off here. He continues, give to God what is God's. This is not a retort. It is an invitation to a different way of being, that third way. Within it, a question of great significance, not a sermon, but an ask. What of you belongs to God, to mystery and to wonder, to the ways of the universe, to beloved community, and what could. May it be so for you and so for us all. Amen. Please rise in body or in spirit for our musical response, number 18 in your gray hymnal, What Wondrous Love.
One of the ways that we live out our mission to create loving community is to contribute financially to the ministries of this congregation and to the good work of our community partners. One of the ministries of this church is our Minister's Discretionary Fund, which is available to anyone in a tough spot. We can help with medical bills, rent, groceries, or other needs. Reverend Sadie's email and phone number on the back of your order of service, or you can contact the church through our website. Our offering this month goes to Mustard Seed Community Health, located in the Cottage Grove neighborhood in East Greensboro, and nationally recognized as a model for integrative care. Mustard Seed Community Health's patients are some of the most vulnerable people in Guilford County. Many don't have health insurance. Many are living in homes that make them and their families sicker, and many are struggling with trauma or struggling simply to put healthy food on the table. Before the Mustard Seed Community Health Clinic opened in 2013, many people went without health care until their problems became acute or even irreversible. If you'd like to make a contribution for our offering to be split with Mustard Seed Community Health, you can do so at the link in the description of this video. You can also mail a check. Ushers will come forward to collect the offering, which will now be gratefully received. Love the energy. Will you join me in our chalice extinguishing words? We extinguish this flame, but not the light of truth, the warmth of community, or the fire of commitment. These we carry in our hearts until we are together again.
If you're online and you'd like to get more connected, you can click the link in the description of this YouTube video and let us know how we can connect with you. If you're in person, you can fill out a pink form at the visitors table, visit our website for our contact form, or simply stick around after worship for our post-worship reflection. During our postlude, anyone who needs to or wishes to leave may go with our blessing. Our adult religious exploration will focus on how the worship service speaks to your life. A few announcements. Mary Pearsall's memorial service will be in person only on Sunday, September 11th. Don't have a time for that so far. Keep an eye or ear out. 2 o'clock, okay. The Greensboro Pride Service is happening on Monday, September 12th in the evening. Our Water Communion RE kickoff will be Sunday, September 18th, and we are delighted to be celebrating Cindy's 10 years of evolving ministry with children and youth. Congratulations to Cindy. More details to come. And now for our benediction in the words of poet Adrian Rich. My heart is moved by all I cannot save. So much has been destroyed. I have to cast my lot with those who age after age perversely, with no extraordinary power, reconstitute the world. Amen. You can place your hands over your heart as we sing our benediction hymn from this house.